The uncomfortable truth of liberation. Hi, my name is Crystal Tantric Yogi. I'm a certified Tantric yoga instructor and intimacy coach. And one thing that I have noticed in recent months is that a lot of people would like a different reality, a reality that brings them more pleasure, brings them more balance, allows them to have more authentic connections, um, to live in abundance, uh, basically to expand and move beyond where they are. I have not met a lot of people who are just completely satisfied with their lives, and a lot of times we will talk about the government and we will talk about, you know, the oppressive systems that we live under. And it's important to address those systems because those systems make it harder for us to really create the lives that we want. And I think most people don't want to be billionaires. I think most people don't need like a bunch of attention from a lot of people. Most people want to be healthy. They want their bodies to be strong. They want to look the best that they can look. Um, they want their bodies to be functional without being in a bunch of pain. They want to be a healthy weight. And a healthy weight just looks like, I think, being able to move in a way that is in accordance to your lifestyle. Like if you like to walk or bike or dance, um, or have children, you want to be able to move freely without feeling heavy, right? You want to be able to breathe without a lot of tension in your chest. Most people would love to be in authentic relationships and have authentic connections that are fulfilling. Most people want to be able to enjoy pleasure without being triggered emotionally all the time or gaslit, or feel shame and fear. Most people want to heal so that they can actually enjoy the life that they're living, enjoy the human experience. I think most people don't mind having challenges. I think most people are not scared of doing something they've never done before. I think most people desire a fairly simple life. They just would like a pleasant life. Unfortunately, I think what a lot of people don't understand, and I've come to this realization as I have grown in the past few months. Around April, on Instagram specifically, I had around, I don't know, maybe a little over 22,000 followers. Today, as of August 11th, I have about 80,000 followers, and I've grown substantially on TikTok as well. Not in the same way, but I've probably doubled my following, maybe tripled my following on TikTok in the last 3 or 4 months. Because I think I had less than 10,000 followers and now I have about 25. And so I'm much more visible, not just to people that are interested in sacred sexuality or Tantra, or people that are interested in yoga or kind of hippie-ish and more like rebels, but I'm getting people who are like, you know, everyday people who are married, and in relationships, and they're trying to figure out things. And it's because of some of my content. I haven't changed who I am, but what I have done is put out more relatable content. I've started to share my perspective and opinions on very relatable issues, um, which has required a lot of vulnerability. But I find that when I speak from that place, it resonates a lot. And I'm here to help people. I could talk about Kundalini and chakras and Shakti and Shiva, and I could talk about different concepts in Tantra that that require me to use a completely different vernacular. I might have to study up and dust off some books in order to do it consistently. But I have a background in yoga, and in Tantra, where I could do that and explore that in that way. But my idea is that I want to help masses of people. I want to help also my people that maybe are not privileged to be able to do a 3 month yoga teacher training or take a year and like learn Tantra because they don't have a full time job. And I've been able to do those things. And I've been practicing yoga since around 2009. took my teacher training in 2011. Like I've not been wealthy or been or had a lot of money, but I've made decisions in my life that allowed me to live in privilege to do certain things that most people, even people who have money, because their mindset is not as expansive, have not been able to do. And that's a whole nother conversation, like having an abundant mindset versus like a very restricted, narrow mindset. It has nothing to do with money. It has more to do with like privilege and being able to like take a step back outside the matrix and make decisions for yourself and have freedom to do that. Which sends me back to my point. And what I find is that I'm becoming more visible is that people yearn for the truth. Why do people yearn for the truth? Because the truth will set them free. And no matter how it's packaged, truth resonates because everybody wants to expand in some way, especially in our society, because there's so many restrictions, there's so many rules, spoken and unspoken. And what happens when we're constantly trying to abide by rules to be accepted or to go to the next level, it's very limiting. And we get locked in a loop of experiencing the same situations, people, places, things over and over again. And it wears us down. And our bodies intuitively know that that's not how we're supposed to be living. Because if you're experiencing the same thing over and over again, not only will it drive you insane and create anxiety, but you're not growing, you're not learning. And we're here to grow, learn, and evolve and connect and expand. So when you're not doing that, no matter how much you change your outside circumstances, no matter how many divorces you have, no matter if you move across the country, and you're still experiencing the same thing, it can be exhausting. It wears you down. So that's why people yearn for truth, because truth cuts through those karmic cycles and shows you like a different path that aligns you with what you really want. However, even though we all desire this, we don't always desire to face the fears that are inhibiting us from being able to hear and receive truth so that we can change our reality, especially as it pertains to our intimate lives, especially as it pertains to sex and our bodies. Lately, I have had some very somewhat self aware, highly intellectual, well cultured clients that have come to me and people that have followed me. And they will say stuff like, I really admire you. I don't agree with everything that you say, but I admire you. And I always know what that means. That means on a subliminal level that I know what you're saying is true because I've experienced this for myself. And I'm not hearing everybody talk about it and give the perspective that you're giving, but I'm not ready to accept how you came to that conclusion. I'm not ready to accept that perhaps sex is as important as it is. I'm not ready to accept that perhaps the things that my grandma and my grandfather said may not be true, or the things that you said that I know my grandparents and my mother and my aunts and my uncles would think about what you said, and they would shun me if I believed it too. I cannot believe that stuff. That's what's underneath it. And a lot of times we fear facing those fears and releasing those inhibitions that really aren't even who we are. These are ideas and ideologies that are passed down from generation to generation that a lot of times are embedded in our culture that kind of actually keep us together. The problem is if you come from a culture that has been colonized or has experienced a lot of poverty and trauma, and there's a culture built around it. For example, soul food. I love soul food. I love fried chicken. I love macaroni and cheese. I love smothered pork chops. But if I ate that all the time, I'd probably have high cholesterol. But what if I come from a family where every Sunday or every weekend, that's what we eat? And that's what we gather around. And that's because our ancestors developed cuisine off of what was available, right? What we could afford to eat, what scraps the master let us have, and we made the best of it. And the food tastes delicious and it's evolved over time and it's great. And maybe over the years, our family gathered at the table and that's what we ate. But maybe over the generations, because the food has changed and because we're not as active or running around and we're evolved and we're more on our phones and we're using technology, we don't burn the fat and the sugar in the way that we used to, or we're trying to live longer. We're trying to live better lives. So now those foods maybe don't agree with us, especially if we're at a certain age, right? And you say, well, I can't eat the macaroni and cheese. I don't do dairy, or I'm not eating fried foods right now, so I'm gonna do baked chicken. Your grandmother might look at you like you're crazy, and then that makes you feel isolated and bad, and then you feel like you got to eat it. Are you going to continue to eat it, even though it's going to give you high cholesterol, make you overweight, and all these things? Or are you going to make adjustments and risk being isolated from your family? Now, hopefully, if your family really loves you, they will not project whatever their insecurities are around you taking a different path and choosing something different onto you. But a lot of families will, especially as it pertains to intimacy, sex, our relationship with our bodies, because there's so much taboo about it. But that's just the example. A lot of people want to be healthy, they want to be fit, they want to be flexible, they want to do all these things, but they still want to be connected to their culture. They don't want to be isolated, they don't want to be shunned away. There's a huge fear in that, because also, if you do things that bring you away from the culture, then you're wondering, where are you going to go? Who are you going to hang out with? Who are you going to be around? Because we also need love, emotional connection, and nurturance from people who care about us. But the problem is, a lot of times what we do culturally is not out of care. A lot of times what we do culturally is born out of trauma. And then we continue to pass down those traumas. And these traumas that we've experienced from our ancestors and our culture that are so embedded in us and bring us together were created from oppressive systems. And so we're constantly complaining about oppressive systems, but we're also upholding them in ways that we may not realize. And so here's the uncomfortable truth. If you are not willing to let some of those cultural things go and face your fears of doing something different that might isolate you from maybe those that you've grown around or things that have brought you comfort, you might get diabetes. You might get high cholesterol. You may exercise all you want, but then you probably end up getting arthritis because you can't out-exercise a bad diet. And relating this to my field, intimacy and sex, if you are not willing to let go of some of your inhibitions and taboos because of purity culture, because of, things that your grandmother or your uncle or your aunt said, things that you've learned in church, things that people don't deem socially acceptable, you may not have the relationship you want. You may never experience an orgasm. You may have ED and PE. You may never be in a relationship that's actually pleasurable because it's based off of ego and societal norms instead of the wanting and the desire to actually be around someone. You might end up in a sexless marriage because you haven't healed your traumas around sex and intimacy. And so you attract someone who also hasn't. And so once the chase is over, you don't know how to talk about sex. You don't know how to liven that area of your life anymore. That's the uncomfortable truth that a lot of people are not talking about. You have to be able to let go of things that once brought you comfort, that are inhibiting you to create the reality you want now. And for all of us, we all have to go through that because we're all meant to grow and evolve. You cannot hold on to everything forever. And oftentimes it is the things that bring us most comfort that we have to let go of. Even if you think about wanting to get in shape, comfort food gives us a lot of comfort. But as you get older, sometimes you can't get away with eating as much comfort food. Sometimes you can't get away with eating stuff at all. I love ice cream, but I cannot eat regular ice cream. I remember I grew up on Bluebell ice cream. There's no way I could eat like 2 or 3 scoops of Bluebell ice cream at 45 years old the way that I did when I was like even 20. It would tear my stomach to shreds. If I want to continue to stay fit and healthy and not be farting all over the place and have my stomach hurting, I had to let that go. Change is inevitable. And especially when it comes to sex and intimacy. If you want to keep your womb healthy, if you want your erections to last long into your 50s and 60s and 70s, you have to heal and release those inhibitions around sex and intimacy. If you want to be in a healthy, loving relationship that's not just based in provision and what somebody can provide, you can provide for someone else and feel used, and you don't want to be in a sexless marriage. And it's not just about the sex, it's about somebody just wanting to be around you other than like you helping them pay bills. It's about being able to have intimate conversations and have emotional connection. You have to release a lot of inhibitions around pleasure. This idea that you have to work for pleasure or that you can't take time out for pleasure. Just to be social and enjoy yourself. If you can't do that, you're not going to be able to attract someone that feels okay just with enjoying you for you. You're going to attract someone that is looking for somebody that can be responsible and help them pay bills and, build a legacy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, over time, that type of relationship can be stale. You have to be okay with prioritizing pleasure. That's the uncomfortable truth about liberation. That's the uncomfortable truth about building the life that you want. You have to be willing to let go of things that have brought you comfort to get to the next level. Especially around sex and intimacy, because the world is so backwards. There's so much taboo. There's so much fear and shame around it. That part of our lives and our consciousness has literally been hijacked from us because of slavery, because of colonization, because the powers that be know that you're much more easier to manipulate when you're not focused on pleasure and relaxation. When you're in survival mode, they can trigger you emotionally to buy things. They can trigger you emotionally to believe that you need something outside of yourself: cars, clothes, houses, a certain look or an aesthetic, staying youthful, preserving your youthfulness in order to be happy. And it's just not true. Joy and peace comes from knowing yourself, being your most authentic self, connecting with God from the most authentic self, just how he made you, and not letting all the other things get in the way, not letting people tell you what is and what isn't, being able to enjoy people without taking on their traumas and their projections, and also allowing people to enjoy you for who you are, where you don't have to wear a mask or pretend to be somebody that you're not. When you're in alignment with who God made you, and you're living out your purpose, that's what's going to bring you joy and peace, and to be around others that cultivate that within you, and to be able to enjoy challenges that help you grow. Not going in circles round and round and round and experiencing the same thing over and 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 over again, because you're not willing to let go of some things that you've outgrown out of fear.